Hey, Jonathan here. I've got a question from John Carico, and it goes like this. Hey, Jonathan, how does one calculate the value of service design? And then he's got a link to a YouTube video for service design. More specifically, how do I determine the value of these three tiers: discovery plus strategy, implementation plus onboarding, and maintenance plus support? Love this question. So quick answer is you calculate the value of service design the same way you calculate the value of anything. If you're talking about a one-to-one project or a one-to-one client engagement, you calculate the value by talking to the client and figuring out what it's worth to them. It's not an exact science, it's more of an art, but the idea is you have a why conversation with the client to understand why they would bother hiring someone expensive like you in the first place. And if you can come up with a good reason, or if you can uncover a good reason from them as to why they should do this, and you agree that it's a good idea, then you've found that there's a good fit between their needs and your expertise, and you can set about creating a value-based proposal with three options to give them, sort of a small, medium, and large budget and scope and outcome for what the engagement might look like. So, you value price everything the same way. Value is something that's in the mind of the buyer. It is the maximum amount of money that they would pay for something. That's the value to them. So once you figure that out, you can set a price that's lower than that, and assuming that that price is acceptable to you, then you've got a deal and you'll have a mutually profitable arrangement. Now, I also want to touch on these three levels that you talk about, because I did a webinar a little while back. It's been very popular, called The Altitude of Involvement. And I list these three ways that you can, as a consultant or a freelancer, you can interact or engage with a client. And there's this sort of early stage where you are helping a client define or design or identify a new status quo. You're sort of creating a design or an architecture or a spec or a prototype. You're designing this new thing. They want to get to a new place that they've never been before, and you help them define what that place might look like, and or you help them sort of chart a course, like a map to that place, whatever that outcome might be. Or you can give them something more along the lines of a compass or some sort of metrics that they can use to help get them there. So that's an early stage, that's sort of early in the client relationship process. And I lump all of those under strategy. The next level down from that, I call implementation, and that's where you help the client implement this new strategy, or they go on this journey or build this piece of software that you've created a prototype for, or whatever it might be. You actually help them along the way. So if the first part is basically drawing a person a map, the second part is helping them along the way on the journey. And then the last piece is maintenance. And that at the sort of tail end, what you're doing there, the middle part, I failed to say, the middle part, you're helping them build the new status quo. So at the highest level, you're designing a new status quo or helping them design a new status quo. At the middle level, implementation, you're helping them reach or build or create the new status quo. And then the third level, support or maintenance, is when you're helping maintain a status quo, the current status quo. So at this point, you'd be doing things like helping customer service deal with calls, or updating plugins, or editing blog posts or publishing blog posts. There are these sort of support and maintenance types of activities. And as you go down from this highest altitude of involvement strategy down to implementation and then finally to maintenance, you have a decreasing profit margin, almost certainly. The value goes down as you go through these layers. The highest value stuff is at the strategy level, and the lowest value stuff is the support and maintenance level. And you probably know this from experience. Anybody who's spent time doing support has probably found that most clients resent it. They feel like, they don't want, it doesn't feel like an investment. It's not a check they want to write. They wish the software would just work, or they wish the marketing plan would just work. But you have to keep putting gas in the car if you want it to run. You have to keep, repairing the engine, if it, replacing the tires. You have to do these things, but no one wants to do it. It's not fun. It's you're just fighting against entropy constantly. So that kind of work, while it's very easy to sell, it's hard to sell at a really profitable price. And as you go up in altitude, it's easier to sell more profitable engagements. So building at the implementation layer, building something tends to be the one that takes, it can take a very long time. Customers usually have a budget that they've set for this. So there can be a lot of money in the revenue sense. So long term, you might have 5 developers on a project or a bunch of people creating videos for you. And you're billing out a lot of hours, or you've set a really high project price, but your costs are also very high. So the margin, while it's better than a maintenance level, it's still not as good as the strategy level, where your engagement is probably a lot shorter, your time investment is really quite low, and the value is derived not from your labor or your hands, but from your brain, from your expertise, from your mind. So if you've been doing what you've been doing for a really long time, and you are great at it, and you can deliver amazing results very quickly, or at least put people on the right path very quickly, help them avoid landmines, not making blunders and common errors, and taking what might be a risky implementation project and de-risking it quite a bit, that is something that clients will pay for. They will pay to mitigate risk by hiring someone they perceive to be an expert in this area. So let's go back to the question real quickly. So that was kind of a soapbox a little bit. The answer to the question is you calculate the value the same way you calculate the value of anything else. And then, if you want to sell higher profit things, you want to drive yourself up. Always try to go higher in your altitude of involvement. Always, if you're doing maintenance now, try and get more implementation gigs. If you're doing a lot of implementation, try and minimize the maintenance and push yourself up into the strategy, the design, the planning, those sorts of things. If you're selling planning and strategy and architecture as part of implementation, break it off, make it a separate thing that you sell independently. Perhaps that's, over time, that might become the only thing that you sell. This very high profit engagement might be the only thing that you end up selling. Okay, that's probably enough. I'm Jonathan Stark. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, just hashtag AskJonathan on LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube or wherever, and we'll get to it as quick as we can. See ya.